So, hello everyone. Thanks for joining my session. So you probably already are aware what the session is about. So we're going to try and cover as many tools and libraries as possible in this session. So it won't be like a deep dive going into one tool, but I try to show you as many interesting stuff as possible, so that after the session, if you're like, maybe that one is really interesting, or maybe it's useful in my project, you can maybe watch another talk about the subject, or simply look at the website, or look at one of my examples. I have examples for all of them. I will show that in a second as well. So my name is Johan Janssen. I'm software architect within ASML. If you have any questions about the session or anything else, you can reach me or reach me later after the session. That's also possible, of course, or simply raise your hand or shout if you have a question. The session is based on the GitHub repository, which you see there. I can also show it on the internet to prove that it's actually there. So if you go to github.com/myname, then you can see the Java Hidden Gems repository there. That repository basically contains 70 tools and library examples. I won't cover all of them in this session, don't worry, but I try to cover as many as possible. But if you're interested, have a look at the repository and you can see the others as well. It's all like basic examples that I created for this session. Basically, I divided all the topics, or all the subjects, into 5 topics: architecture, test, implementation, security, and build. So we will go from one topic to the other, but let's simply get started. So we start with ArcUnit. ArcUnit is a tool which basically allows you to verify your architecture with basically JUnit tests. So if we look at some of the examples, so I can, for instance, say, okay, all the classes that reside in a package controller should have a name, the class name should end with controller. And then I check it, and I assert that the name is correct. And it's not always correct because, of course, I created an example which fails. One class is called wrongly named. It should be wrongly named controller, then it would pass. So that's a simple way to test it. And this, you can just run it with your normal unit tests every day. And there are different options. Like here you see that all the classes that reside in the package payment should only depend on classes from these packages. So you can, with layered applications, or if you use onion architecture or whatever, you can define your architecture in these kinds of rules and then automatically verify them. So for example, all my common classes should depend on stuff from common or Java. Common stuff in common shouldn't depend on payment-specific stuff, for example. And I can even define layers explicitly, so I can also say, okay, I have a controller layer, and that's defined by all the classes in the controller package, the same for service. And then I can say, okay, the controller, that's my first point of my Java application, shouldn't be accessed by any classes, and the service layer should only be accessed by the controller layer. So this way you make it a bit more explicit, you name the different layers, and then you define the rules for it. So it's a really easy one to make sure that your architecture stays the same over time when people start leaving and joining the company. Then we go to some more test-based libraries and tools. And the first one is awaitility. So normally, let's say you have a unit test and you call something which is an asynchronous operation. Yeah, what can you do? In your test, you can put in a thread.sleep, like I did over here. So basically, you sleep long enough so the asynchronous operation is completed and you can retrieve the result and then assert that it's indeed correct. But that, of course, is a bit ugly. If you run it on a quick computer or a small computer, it might either break or it might spend a lot of time in the sleep. With awaitility, you can basically change it a little bit. So what we basically say, okay, we have this example list where stuff is being added. And with awaitility, I simply say, okay, await at most 2 seconds until the example list.size equals 1. And then I can do my assert. So I basically wait until some condition is valid, and then I do my normal asserts. And if I run this, you can see that it actually performs better. This, of course, it's a bit silly example, stuff which takes like 1 or 2 seconds. But let's say you have longer taking asynchronous applications, then it can shave off a lot of time from your unit test. So here we see with awaitility, the unit test took like 1.1 second, and with all my sleep stuff, it took 2 seconds. So this simple example, if you do it for a large code base, it saves a lot more time. Okay, then we go to another one, that's the Jacoco agent. Who here knows Jacoco? Okay, so it's used for coverage and stuff for your unit test. I think everyone is aware of that. Who here knows the Jacoco agent? Yeah, I see 2 or 3 hands, I think. And that's an interesting one. A lot of people are not aware of the Jacoco agent, but it's actually quite an interesting one. So what you basically do with the Jacoco agent is you start a Java process. So this is simply Java. I say where the results should be stored, what it should include, and I supply my jar file. So let's simply execute this example. Put this in a terminal. No, not that one. Yeah, Jacoco agent, and then I can execute this one. And now it's basically a really simple REST endpoint, but just to demonstrate how it works. So I go to my website. It's car. It retrieves some car details. Not really spectacular. And then I stop the application. This is really important. If you don't stop the application, the result file of the Jacoco agent isn't written away. At the beginning, I didn't know this, so I thought I messed up somehow. So I did it a lot of times, but every time the file was empty. And then I found out that actually, you basically need to wait until the complete file is written before you can do these kinds of things and use the results. Because the result file that it's normally created, it's not really human readable, at least not for me. So what we do is we create an HTML file out of it. So then we have the target file and we have the index.html. Let's see, where is my browser thingy? Oh, of course, the wrong one. So here, if we go to the controller, click a few times through, we see that the retrieve car method is being called. I called the get method, the really simple one, but I didn't post anything to it. So I can see that the green stuff is the code again, which is covered, which you are normally used to with like normal unit tests. But this you can use for anything. So you could do even a performance test and see what part of your code is covered by the performance test. We did this with acceptance tests. So we had quite a extensive set of acceptance tests that covered, we taught all our functionality, and we ran it against the code base. Of course, some exceptional paths aren't touched by it, but we noticed that quite large code blocks were also not touched by it, and it was actually that code. So if you have good like cucumber tests, which test most of your features, and you run those automatically with a Jacoco agent, you can see which part of your code is dead, basically. So it has some quite useful applications. Then we go to PyTest. So who here in the past had a requirement in their company that they should have like 80% coverage for the unit tests? Yeah, quite a lot of people. Is it useful? I mean, you can just call your code and don't do any asserts, and you still reach the 80%, and your manager is happy. But yeah, I mean, with PyTest, what actually happens is the normal code is executed. So again, I have a really simple example with some if-else constructions, and I have a simple test, which does tests just one scenario. So you know this is not good enough for a good test. But with PyTest, what it does, it will execute this test, and then it will change the code. So not the code of the test, but the actual production code. So here, for instance, it says bigger than. PyTest will create a variant of this with a smaller than. So it makes all kinds of what they call mutants of your code. So for each test, it can create like 10 different versions of your test, and it will run those tests, or 10 different versions of your code, and then it will run the test against all those different variants. If the tests still pass, then it basically means your test isn't good enough, because your code changed without the test breaking. So PyTest for me is a really useful tool to see if my tests are really useful. It's a way better indication than having 80% coverage. And one thing to keep in mind, of course, it runs a lot of variants of the same test, so it can take a bit of a while. So maybe you want to do this in like a daily build instead of like for each commit. But we run this. And then, okay, It already gives some output, but it also generates a PyTest report, which you can open, which again is just an HTML file. And then I can see, okay, I have one class. Here it says which parts are nicely covered and which ones are worst covered. And at the bottom, I can actually see the changes that were being made. So for instance, I have an integer that's being returned, and PyTest changes the code so it always returns 0. And some other conditions. So all of these, they are being tested basically. Here you can see which ones are active. You can disable some if you don't like them. But this way you can test your code. Can really recommend it. Helps a lot of issues and to detect easy how good your tests are, and also if you change a feature or implement a feature to give you better feedback. Then we go to test containers. So often in the past, when you, for instance, had an integration test which used MySQL or PostgreSQL or some other database or external service, you would need to install that locally so that you could run your integration test. And on the build server, it's a mess because you somehow also need it on the build server. Nowadays, I think the entire world uses containers, Docker containers or whatever containers. And test containers basically provides you with like an environment where a container is automatically spun up for your test. In this case, a MySQL container, but can be anything like Kafka container or name your cool and hip framework, basically. Mostly for storing or sending data, of course. And then what I can do is I can use that container in my test. So this is a really simple example. I didn't want to use too many other libraries in it, but I retrieve the URL, password, and everything. Then I make a connection to the database, and I simply execute some queries to the database. So instead of all those local installed and on the build server installed databases, you simply use a Docker image for it. So it works really well. Then I have another example for testing, the last one, and that's with Gatling. Let's get that up and running. Let's see. I first need to start this one. And then start the test. Maybe good to also show you what actually the logic is, because maybe that's more interesting instead of only the configuration. So Gatling is like, maybe some of you have used JMeter in the past for performance testing. JMeter is nice, except that it's horrible. At least I always had problems with it. It has some quirks. It's in some weird configuration stuff. With Gatling, in the past it was always a Scala DSL. Now they also have a Java DSL. And you basically write your performance test as Java code. So here we go to a specific URL, and then we define a scenario. So in my scenario, I will first retrieve the car endpoint, and then the car part endpoint, and then I will check if the result is a 200 OK, basically. I have a pause in between. And then we see this one, the setup, and it's basically like a while loop across this one. So here we will start 8 users in the period of 10 seconds. So after like 5 seconds, I have about 4 users, and after 10 seconds, I have 8 users. And for all those 8 users, this scenario will be executed. So that's all we need to test a simple REST endpoint with Gatling. Now where are we? And let's go to the directory. And then I almost forgot. I will show some different stuff. So mission control, it's not necessary for Gatling, but I show it all at once to save some time. So with mission control, I can connect to any application that I have, and it's basically a monitoring/profiling application. Before it was part of the JDK. Nowadays you need to download it separately, but it's completely for free. So I can start what they call is a flight recording. I can configure a lot of stuff here in how much detail I want, etc. You can even use this on production. It has like 1% overhead. Unless, of course, you enable a lot of these things, then it can have a bit more overhead, but it's really highly optimized. So let's start this one, and in the meantime, also quickly start my Gatling stuff. What was it? Maven Gatling test. So now, basically, I am profiling the results of my performance test. That's basically it. Apparently, I need to update Gatling. And it starts the basic simulation. So you get some progress updates in between. Not really cool and graphical, but I mean, you know what the status is. We're at 50%, 100%, and it again creates a nice report. And who of you used JMeter in the past? Yeah? How much time did you spend on creating reports in Excel and getting all the data in nice graphs? I mean, if you use JMeter, you probably know what I talk about. With Gatling, this is auto-generated in a nice HTML file. I think you can even export it to PDF if you want. So you can see what like the 99 percentile is, the max, the mean response times, how many users were active. Yeah, basically every detail you want is automatically available in these simulations. You can even, what was it? Go to the more details page, which shows more or less the same information, bit more details. So there's a lot of information available there. And then, yeah, my mission control profiling. So it has nothing to do with Gatling. It's just you can use them if you want. It analyzed the run of my application for 1 minute. And it says, okay, maybe have a look at the heap. There is something strange with that. And then it says, okay, most of the heap was used by only a few classes. Yeah, it's logical. I had a really simple example. But I can see a lot of detail, basically anything that's going on. I can, for instance, see which methods were called and which methods take most of the time in the execution. So then you can optimize those methods. You can see which exceptions have been thrown. You can look at garbage collection. Okay, when did a garbage collection occur and how long did the garbage collection take? How much memory was being used so that you can optimize your heap sizes and stuff like that. A lot of details. It's all available in here, so I can really recommend to have a look at these kinds of tools. As said, it's free, so yeah, try it out. Let's quickly stop this one, because I always forget it. And then we go for the implementation ones. We start with the equals verifier. So yeah, I don't know about you, I sometimes try to write an equals method. Writing one is relatively easy, writing a proper one is quite hard. So to give an example, here I created a really simple first name, last name class for a student, and I do an equals method. Of course, it's not really good, but how do you know if your equals method is good? Most of the time you figure out after some time, okay, yeah, these objects should be the same, but they aren't, so I need to improve my equals method. But then you basically find out on production probably or somewhere. Well, with equals verifier, what you can actually do is you can assert it. So I can use equals verifier and I say, okay, for my student class, verify if my equals method is okay. And then I can see, okay, there is an assertion error, and I can retrieve the message. And let's see, the message is here. So equals verifier saw some issues with it. So it's basically not a good equals method. So I improved it later, the fixed one. This is a proper equals method. It's a bit more difficult, and these ones should be final. But now if I test the same one, then I can again use equals verifier for my fixed student, verify it again, and it's a good method. And so if you have equals methods that you implemented yourself, I can really recommend using this small library to test how good they actually are. Then we come to GraphQL. Maybe some of you already saw the session today about GraphQL. I will just quickly show it for the ones that haven't seen it. So basically with GraphQL, what we can do is normally if you have a REST endpoint, for instance, you retrieve a student. Then that student might have books or classes or whatever, and all that data is returned while you retrieve a student. Well, maybe on a page you're only interested in the first name of the student, and all the other data is basically a waste. With GraphQL, what you can basically do is you send a query to your endpoint, to your REST endpoint, which basically specifies which data that you want. So in my case, I have an account with a user, and I can choose to either retrieve everything or just a part of it. So let's see here. I think they're specified. Yeah, so this is basically the schema for it. So I have an account and a user, and I can query these ones, and then I can simply retrieve whatever I want. So in this case, what I retrieve at first is the account, and then I assert that indeed I only get the account back. So in this case, I only get the account back, and with the more advanced query that I created here, I retrieve everything, so also the user. So this way I can quite easily filter the data that I want to retrieve from my REST endpoint. So if you have large REST endpoints, this can be really beneficial. Then we go to the next one, which is handlebars. Who of you got a recruitment email this week or this month? No one? I see some more hands. Probably you get some recruitment emails. So maybe you're thinking about also becoming a recruiter and spamming your fellow developers, because you know what they want, right? You could use Handlebars for it. Handlebars is a templating engine. So basically you specify something, it's basically HTML, and you can put in some stuff that you later replace in code. So for instance, first name, last name, how many years of experience, blah, blah, blah. So I simply created a small demo application for it. So what I do is I fill in all these properties, and it automatically generates some HTML. So let's quickly just do this. So, of course, 20 years of Graal VM experience is required for any job nowadays. PHP can also come in helpful. J2EE, yeah, and who knows that it nowadays is called something else. And of course, yeah, it should have a cool title, right? Because, just senior developer doesn't cut it anymore. So here is basically, I could send it to a file. I just output the text. So this is the HTML that results in it. And now you also know why you get those weird emails where stuff isn't filled in. It's basically they forgot to give one of the properties, and then yeah, you have either first name still standing there or some other stuff instead of your proper first name. And then, yeah, there is some automatically generated stuff, like, yeah, your salary is, of course, really high. So if you ever want to do templating stuff, I can recommend this one. Yeah, one with a really cool name, Java Poet. So with Java Poet, what I can actually do is I can generate Java classes on the fly. So instead of basically writing them up front, I could dynamically create Java classes. So in this case, I'm going to create a class, with, again, a really simple one, like a student one, with a first name and a last name, some methods, and a constructor. And I can do that with this code, basically. Let's make this one a bit smaller. Why am I not in presenter mode? Let's make it a bit bigger, like this. So basically here I define everything, my methods, my constructor, and then in the end my class, and I can build it and then expect that I get this as a return value. Would you use this to build your entire application? Of course not. It's horrible. But if you build a library and you need to automatically generate classes for whatever reason, this is a good one. I know that it's used in a lot of libraries that are out there already. So if you ever write a library or want to do something dynamic with Java code, have a look at it. Then we go to another one with a really nice name, JSoup. How these people come up with these names, I don't know. But so with JSoup, basically it's a tool to sort of query HTML pages. So I create some packages for Chocolatey to install Java distributions on Windows. And there is a website that shows how many downloads I have. I like statistics, so that's important, of course. And I basically retrieve that HTML page. It's not my HTML page, someone else created it, and I can then sort of filter it. So I say, okay, I want to have the part with these CSS attributes in it, and because, I think the page wasn't really nicely structured, so in the end I do some looping through elements and then filter stuff to get the right result. So I can simply run this one. And then, okay, it doesn't show anything. Huh? Okay, normally it shows the text. Maybe they changed the HTML page, that's also possible. I should maybe also add an assert to check if I get the right stuff back. But, if you want to do something with HTML parsing, this might be a nice library to try out. Then the next one is lib phone number. So often if you go to a website, they request you to fill in a phone number. But yeah, you don't want to fill in a phone number because then people start calling you, and we're developers, we don't want to call with people. So you fill in something random, basically, or just A or 0. And a lot of websites, they accept it because they don't have a proper check on the phone number. Or in some other ways, they are too restrictive, and they don't see that like the plus sign is accepted or the 00 stuff in front of the phone number is not accepted. You could, of course, use regular expressions and stuff like that for it. Or you could use something like lib phone number. So to show how this works is I basically define a phone number, then I parse it, and then with lib phone number, I can check if it's a valid number. And I can even see, okay, from which location is this number, if it's a fixed landline, basically. If it's a carrier, I have an example here, so I can also retrieve the location of the carrier, then it's a country. And let's see, where's my example? There was one, which also showed the carrier. It's because I accidentally typed something in. So the carrier is KPN. So with this tool, you can basically verify that every phone number that's entered into your system is actually a valid phone number, which can be quite helpful and annoying for me because I like to fill in fake phone numbers. Then MicroStream. So with MicroStream, basically what we can do is we store data in a more object-oriented manner. I think most of you have heard of Hibernate and JPA with ORM frameworks where you basically map from one solution to the other. With MicroStream, it's a bit more like integrated. It's more object-oriented based. So if we, for instance, look at an example with Spring Boot, I can define, this is normal Spring Boot class with a car repository. And what I can then do is simply remove everything, and then I add some car stuff, and it all works automatically. I mean, there's not really any ORM mapping or something in it. I just store objects, and I retrieve objects with the normal methods, like size and whatever. And it all happens because, I simply specify some MicroStream store location. In this case, it's a plain file. You can also store in various database solutions. And so it looks a little bit like JPA, but then even a bit more object-oriented without the relational mapping stuff in between. So if you're looking at storing these kinds of data, this might be a nice solution for it. Then we come to Opta Planner, which is nowadays, it has a different name. It's now called, let's see, what was the name? I have it. Opta Planner, it's forked, and it's now called Timefold. But, I mean, you can still use the old one, but probably it's better to use Timefold as the original creator did the fork. And what you can do with Opta Planner is basically do planning stuff. So it's quite a good name, right? So you can, for instance, my demo shows you how to do scheduling for a conference, but you can also create like a recipe on how to do the best delivery. So if you have like a shipping company and you want to deliver to 20 addresses, it can calculate the best route and things like that. So all kinds of planning things which are basically supported by AI to make this happen. So what I created is basically a scheduling application for conferences, which automatically schedules all the sessions based on some constraints. So yeah, what's then a constraint? It sounds a bit weird, but it's basically a rule where it should adhere to. Okay, now I again clicked on something which I shouldn't have done. So room conflict. It's not really convenient if you have two sessions at the same time in the same room. I mean, it's annoying to have two speakers, right? One is already annoying enough. Then speaker conflict. Let's see. Yeah, a speaker can teach at most one session at the same time. So with a few lines, we can basically write that down. Another conflict here. A speaker prefers to teach in a single room. We like to be consistent, we don't like change. So if we do two sessions, we prefer to have both of them in the same room so we know how to connect the HDMI. And then there is another one. So if a speaker has multiple sessions, they should be happy, they got accepted with multiple sessions, so we punish them a bit by planning all the sessions back to back. Why not? And the last one is language. In one room, we prefer to have one language. I mean, all talks here are in English, but there are some conferences that have also another local language. So they have some sessions in, for instance, Turkish, and some sessions in English. And it would be maybe beneficial to do all of the same languages in the same room, so people can simply stay there. If you can only speak Turkish, you stay in the Turkish room. If you prefer English, you stay in the English room, basically. So these are all kinds of rules. So let's now also start the application. See how it works. So here we see basically the schedule at the top. It's empty because we need to do some work. And then I have a lot of sessions that I need to plan. And then, yeah, it's really, now I need to do a lot of work, planning, preparing, everything, and then it's done. So really easy. It's really quick. It tries to optimize as much as possible. You can even let it optimize for a really long period of time, trying to optimize even more. But for now, I did like basically a quick shot. And what we can see indeed, like first row, it's all English talks, right? Second row, it is all Dutch talks. So that's nice. It fits with my constraints. Now I see something wrong here. I see 2 sessions in the same room. But I mean, I said it shouldn't be planned in the same room. Anyone an idea why I have 2 in the same room? Did I make a mistake? Yeah, it's really I did it on purpose, basically. I have more sessions than I have slots. So then, yeah, it cannot optimize any further because there is no room free anymore. So algorithm works perfectly. It's just that I cheated the system. And there's actually one more quirk in this one. So Sander Mak, my former colleague, I like him, so I gave him a lot of sessions, 4 actually. So here he has one, and then here he has no session, and here he again has a session. But we had some rule which said if a speaker has multiple sessions, they should be back to back, right? But somehow that went wrong here. And at first I was like, okay, something's going wrong, what's this? But then later I found out that to check if a session was back-to-back, I check if there is 2 the same sessions basically in a 30-minute time period. But between these ones, there is a break of 45 minutes. So basically, yeah, my constraint wasn't good enough. I should have said like within 1 hour or something like that. And then it would have scheduled them back-to-back. And so it's really powerful, but you need to make sure that all the constraints that you put in are valid, because else, I mean, yeah, it just follows your rules. Then I have another one, Apache Spark. So Apache Spark is mostly used for big data processing. It can schedule work across multiple nodes, multiple machines for big data and large algorithms and difficult stuff. And I also had a really difficult task for it. Let's see, I think it's under Apache Spark. Because I needed to read a file and process it. And you all know how difficult it is to read a file in Java. You need the input stream, or nowadays it's a little bit easier, but I have a file which is 29 gigabytes, which contains all the Amazon reviews for the last I don't know how many years, because I needed an example, basically. And when I tried it with a plain Java example, compare it with Spark, first I needed to write the code and get the file read and everything, and then it started processing, and after, I don't know, a lot of time, it basically went out of memory, because you cannot keep 29 gigabytes in memory if you don't have enough memory. With Apache Spark, that's basically all handled automatically. So let's show the example here. So I have a test. Let's first start with running it, because it's quick, but it still takes a little bit of time. And then I explain how it works. So basically, I have a really large JSON file, and I can check how big it is, how many records it contains, that kind of stuff. And then what I basically do is I read one by one each line, and I convert them all to a review. So a review just contains a few fields, not really interesting, just read one by one, and then I start filtering it, because I only want to have the reviews where the text Java programming language is in the review. For some reason, because they read the book, or maybe they don't like the Java programming language and just bash in any kitchen appliance about it. So it's being filtered, 29 gigabytes, and at the end I check if it's 28, because I already know it's 28, and then I can automatically check it, and I also print it. So it's now it's of course running in the test one and not here. So we see it parse some stuff, but it takes a little bit longer. So let's look at the next one first, and then we come back to this one to save some time. So toggles. So you had a lot of these cool sessions at conferences about feature flags by Netflix and all those big companies who do feature flags, and then you try it yourself, and it's all, yeah, at least for me, it's always a bit of a struggle. You need to maintain those flags. Somehow they never go away. Yeah, it's a bit of a hassle. And I actually never knew that there was a small tool called Toggles, which can actually help you a bit with it. So if you look at Toggles, let's start the application. So Toggles is, I use a Spring Boot application. You can use it with other languages as well. And what you need to do is you define the features. So I have a few features here. I have an awesome feature and an almost ready feature. I can give them some labels. I can say if they're enabled by default or not. And then I can use that in my controller. So in my controller, I say, OK, this one is always available, feature 1. The awesome feature is only available when the awesome feature flag is enabled. And the almost ready one is only available when the almost ready feature flag is enabled. So how does that look like? If we go to a local host, and I think it was console. So here I can see my feature flags. You get this for free. It's like a dashboard which you get for free if you use Toggles. And you can see this one is enabled and this one is disabled. So if I go to a local host, not London, okay, London weather, we know it's rainy, don't need to see that. What was it? It was awesome. So we can access that immediately because it's enabled by default. We had that in the configuration. Now if I go to almost ready, I don't see anything. I made it really simple, just displays nothing. So let's enable it. It's enabled. Refresh the page, and it's there. So if you want to do something with feature flags and toggles, I can recommend this one. It's a really simple, clean tool that you can use. How far is my Spark? Yeah, my Spark is also done. So I processed 29 gigabytes, remember that. Here I can see all the, probably mostly books about the Java programming language, the reviews they got. And I see it took 2 minutes to parse all these records. So that was on just one machine, my machine. With Spark, you can even scale it across multiple machines in the cloud or use your colleague's laptop or whatever. So it's a really powerful tool for processing big files or big data. And then we go to the more security-related tools, and we start with the OWASP dependency check. So let's go to the right directory. Okay, not mess this completely up. And show that one. No, the POM. So what the OWASP dependency check does basically is, I can go back to the full screen one, then you can see it better. It checks all your dependencies, and it retrieves a list of known vulnerabilities from the internet. My configuration caches it locally, so you shouldn't use that configuration. I don't want to depend on the Wi-Fi here. And then what it basically does is, for each dependency, it looks up in the file it got from the internet if that dependency contains any known vulnerabilities. So let's simply run this. What was it? I think Maven Verify or something. Yeah, Maven Verify. So it's just a Maven plugin. So I have it in here. It's called Dependency Check Maven. Like I mentioned, I do this stuff locally. I cached it everything because it retrieves quite some data from the internet, and I didn't want you guys to wait for that. And after it's finished, it also creates an HTML report, but it also displays basically what's wrong. And here we see log4j. I mean, we all remember, right? We don't talk about it anymore. But there was something with it. Can't remember what exactly. A number of CVEs, apparently. And so this scans all your dependencies. Really easy. Just integrate it in your build, run it each night, or on each commit if you want. Then there's another one. It's called PASI. That's also security related. So basically, PASI allows you to configure restrictions for your password. So let's make it a bit bigger. So I define some rules for passwords. If you have an application and your user needs to enter a password, you can, of course, with a regular expression or something, check if it's okay, if it has all the requirements. You could also use something like POSI. And here, it's basically in natural language, all the requirements are written down one by one. Like the password length, that some should be uppercase, how many digits we want, that we don't want white space, that we don't want some sequences of characters. So all kinds of rules that we can define. And then basically what I can do is, so I have a password validator. It's called validator. And then with that validator, I can validate any password. So if I enter password, of course, I get back the result that it's not valid. It asserts false. And then I can also retrieve why it's not valid, because each validator has a list of messages. So here it says exactly what's wrong with the password. All these three things are not right. Then I have a bit more difficult password, try it again. But now I have a sequence, 1, 2, 3. It's not allowed. And you can create some more advanced passwords and then check them again, and these are valid. So if you ever want to do something with passwords, at least I like this better than fiddling around with regex. Then let's go to stuff with Docker. Who here is working with Docker? Yeah, more or less everyone. That's what I expected. So you have some options if you work with Docker. You can do like the Docker files and create the file manually, the Docker file, and specify whatever you want to have in there. Might be a bit cumbersome, and one of the disadvantages there is that you need some more configuration if you want to do it properly. If you want to have a secure Docker image, you need to make sure that some account stuff is disabled and things like that. And if you all need to do that manually, you might forget something or you need to Google it. There is also a way to basically automatically generate good Docker images. And there are some different plugins for it. For instance, Jib from Google allows you to automatically create a Docker image. We specify the main class, and then we can just run some Maven commands to automatically generate proper Docker images. And the same you can do with Spring. It has some integrated support. So if you use the Spring command, Maven Spring Boot build image, it also creates an image automatically. It's quite convenient. On the other hand, it's also a bit magic, because you, for instance, you don't know which version of Java is used now. You don't know the base image, like the operating system that's being used. And I saw in the past sometimes that even if I switch from one Java version to another, it used the Java built from another vendor. You can tweak some of these, so these plugins have some parameters that you can give to specify, for instance, the Java version. So I think while this helps, I think it's also good to specify some things so that at least you're sure what's inside the image, instead that it's completely magical, because in the end it's the stuff that will run on your production environment, and I think you should be aware what's running there. And then we have one where I will switch to my GitHub repository. So if you have a project, sometimes it happens that you have dependencies that are not up to date. I mean, all of you probably keep them up to date really nicely, but I've seen some projects with old dependencies. You can update them manually. IntelliJ can help you a bit with it. There are some plugins which can help you to do this a bit easier. And there are also tools like Renovate and Dependabot and tools like that, which basically you can run them automatically, for example, each day. And then what they do is they automatically create pull requests for each dependency that needs an update. So for example, let's see. This one I neglected to log4j because else my example broke. But for instance, test containers, we saw it before. It had a new version, and I automatically got a pull request, which basically updates the version to the latest version. And then I only need to merge it. You can even automate it further. So what you could do is that these tools create a pull request. You automatically run a build based on that pull request. And if the build succeeds, automatically merge it to your master branch or main branch, however it's called in your project. But this makes it really easy to stay up to date for your versions. So I can really recommend it. And if we look at the versions of dependencies, sometimes it's a bit tricky. If we look, for instance, at JAX-B in the past, it was part of Java EE. Nowadays, it's part of Jakarta EE. And it basically changed names a bit. So if you simply update to the latest version, it's not the latest version because you're still using some old artifact. So how can we fix this? Let's have a look. So there's old group IDs alerter. Again, it's a plugin. It's available for Gradle as well. Most of the stuff I show in Maven here is also available for Gradle. It's just that I don't want to show two examples at the same time. So if we go to the old group IDs alerter, and let's see what command was needed for this one. Verify. Of course, I put in some old stuff to basically show you what the new ones are. So for instance, here it says, okay, this is the old JAX-B. Nowadays, it's this artifact. So make sure that you replace one by the other. So this one, probably you should integrate it together with the Dependabot or the one that I showed before. Then we go to Open Rewrite. Who here is still using Java 8? Yeah, so you can manually upgrade or you can use Open Rewrite for it. And Open Rewrite is able to do all kinds of migrations, and it can upgrade from one version to the other, but also use the new features automatically. So it also improves your code, basically. And let's see where my recipe is. So I have some old JUnit 4 stuff, and I run Open Rewrite on it. Let's see. Yeah, it's running. And it made some changes. And yeah, let's briefly look at the changes for a quick minute. And let's see. Where are they? So here you see that it updated my dependencies. So now I have JUnit Jupyter, JUnit 5 basically. It removed the JUnit 4 dependency. It actually also fixed my formatting. So you can see I on purpose did some crappy formatting, and it fixed that as well. And then you can see that it also fixes my examples here. So instead of some possible null object here, it turns it around. So it does all kinds of improvements. It makes sure that the right imports are being used instead of the old ones. It fixes my test, makes the test actually nicer, so it uses the new way of asserting exceptions, all kinds of stuff. If you're interested in this, tomorrow Tim is giving a session about it at Devox UK, so you can check out the session or ping Tim. He's probably more than willing to help you out. And then the last one for today is the Maven daemon. Where is my terminal? Simply start a new one. So who's using Maven here? Some people? A lot of people? Who's using Maven daemon? Not a lot of hands. So let's see. If we do Maven compile on all my stuff. Oh, what did I? Yeah, I need to go in my examples directory. Maven compile. It takes a bit of time. We can grab a cup of coffee. We can wait a little bit longer. "12 seconds. Maven daemon. And the good thing of this is just a tool you install. You don't need to change your pom.xml or whatever. It all does it automatically. And then it runs. And it's done. And if you run it again, it's even faster because it uses some cached stuff. And so really try it out if you use Maven. It really speeds up stuff. And there we come to the end. So a question for all of you. Who already knew all the tools and libraries that I demoed? No one? Then for sure you have something to investigate later this evening, right? Hey, thank you all for joining. And if you have questions, let me know.